that's when I knew that they're overloaded, they're tired, they're worn out, because they are expected to have the 50,000-foot view of being able to see the communications and the marketing and the vision and the direction of the church. But they also have to be in the weeds of everything.
Welcome to episode number 179 of the Missional Marketing Podcast. My name is Bart, Blair. I am the brand director for Missional Marketing, and I'm joined today by the CEO of Missional Marketing, Mr. Jason Hamrock. Hello, Jason.
Hi, Bart. How's it going, man?
I am doing very well. I'm really excited today because we brought on one of our Missional Marketing personalities.
We did, yes.
Zach Bernauer. Zach, if you've been around the Missional Marketing Church Communications space for a while, you have probably seen Zach's face or heard Zach's voice. He's one of our popular coaches around the missional marketing space, and also one of our roadshow trainers. We've talked about roadshows here the last couple of episodes that we've recorded, live events that we do around the country where you can come and get a hands-on learning, training experience. And really, it's the three of us. We kind of rotate in and out, tag team. We got some roadshows coming up in 2026 that we're going to share with you, our audience, about as we wrap up this particular podcast. But what I wanted to do today was set up a conversation, really just to get some insight from the two of you on some issues and topics, conversations that we often have with church leaders, communications directors, and other people that come to our roadshows, some pain points, so to speak. And so the working title of this episode is Top 4 Pain Points for Church Communication Directors. I don't know if we'll hit all 4 today, but we'll try. If we don't, then I'll have to retitle the podcast episode. But I think we'll get all 4 of them. But I'm going to set this up, and I'm just going to start, kind of teeing you guys up to speak on these particular pain points, how common you think they are, and what maybe some of the solutions are to some of these pain points. You guys ready to go?
Oh, let's do it. Yeah.
All right, here we go. Here's the number 1 pain point that I think is really common amongst church communication directors, and that is that they are the jack of all trades and they experience all kinds of overload. Have you heard that? Have you experienced that? Have you seen that when we're working with our church comms directors?
Well, yeah,
Yes.
yeah. I mean, yeah. Go ahead, Zach. I want you.
And normally the phrase is the jack of all trades, master of none. But I do want to give comm directors bonus that they become the masters of all too. Interestingly enough, probably 2 weeks ago, I was on 2 separate calls, and both of those comms directors, 2 different churches, they said, do you have a templated job description for comms director or comms positions? And I actually got excited because I know how overloaded they are. And I said, so yes, but you're hiring? And they both went, no, we're not hiring. I'm just trying to figure out what I'm actually supposed to be doing in my job. And that's when I knew. That's when I knew that they're overloaded, they're tired, they're worn out, because they are expected to have the 50,000-foot view of being able to see the communications and the marketing and the vision and the direction of the church. But they also have to be in the weeds of everything. And so they're balancing the struggle of not being able to cast vision and be strategic, but also having to do all the work. And so they become the jack of all trades and overloaded.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I'll expand on that a little bit. It seems like unless you are hired to be only the communications director, even in that scenario, most of us wear multiple hats. Mm-hmm. So you're probably saying, yep, if you're a comm director listening to this right now, yep, I also do, first time guest assimilations, or I'm over groups, or, something like that. You wear lots of hats. And so when you're wearing lots of hats, just like any other ministry position, this is even though it might be under operations, communications is a ministry, and there's so many layers, and it's so deep and so wide, and it doesn't really matter the size of church. If you're an active church, which you got a lot going on, there's like you said, there's a ton going on, Zach, but there's the weeds that you have to get in it. And the problem is week in and week out, you can live in those weeds and you don't really even realize where you're headed and where you're going. And it's very simple to get lost. You guys know this when we do this road show. Do you remember what I say up front? I say a few things, but one of the things I say is, hey, listen, over the next 6 hours, I want you to work on your business, not in your business. And what I mean by that is you have to take dedicated time to zoom out and go, what are we doing here as a comms team and as a church? Are we even making a difference? Are we moving the needle? How do we know we're winning? And you can't, if you spend your time just in the emails and in the trenches of day-to-day activity, how do you know you're even winning? So you got to be able to zoom out and go, man, how do I not get overloaded? And what do I do to give myself margin and some bandwidth to even move the needle on all this stuff?
I think one of the things we note when we're at the roadshows, and I would venture that many of the people listening to this episode would say that this is true about them, communications isn't even their primary responsibility.
Yeah.
It's the and, right?
Yeah.
So we always use that phrase when we're at the roadshows. You are the communications director and the first impressions team director and the assimilations director and the parking lot coordinator or whatever it is, right? Or vice versa. You might actually be the worship pastor or the creative director and the communications director. And so we recognize that you're spinning a lot of plates, wearing many hats is the phrase that, we often use. The challenge is that we come into a situation where you are a solo practitioner. You're the only person in your department managing all of the communications, inflow and output. Yet there's an expectation, it's more like a corporate expectation that you can actually, that you can produce at a level that's comparable to what an entire team might be producing somewhere else in a more corporate or a business environment. So there's a lot of tension there. And of course, that does lead to fatigue, exhaustion, burnout. We've talked about that a lot. We've talked about that on this podcast that, that's not, in fact, I think one of the quotes that we quoted you on, Jason, in one of our last episodes was the fact that, being burned out is not Jesus' design for the local church, right? Like that shouldn't be part of the equation, yet it often is. As you guys are working with different communications directors or people in the communication seats, what's some of the counsel or the guidance that you might give them as it relates to setting expectations, creating boundaries, and managing the fact that they are wearing multiple hats in their role? Zach, why don't you talk a little bit to that?
Yeah, I would lean into the idea of communication. And I think that's very hard for us, ironically, as communications directors, because we are such high achieving individuals. Like we are perfectionists, we are type A, we know and want to get everything done. And to be able to say that I physically can't do that, or in my capacity, feels like a defeat and it feels like a loss. And it actually ends up making us feel like we don't have as much value and worth in that. And that tends to be like the biggest reason for burnout, is because now you feel like you are isolated and you're met with expectations, but you haven't accurately communicated what is on your plate. Sometimes your lead pastor does not know all that you have to do. Sometimes the executive pastor doesn't know all that you have to do. There was a church I was meeting with 2 weeks before Easter. The XP came and said, we want to do this whole giving initiative, almost like I am second interviews, and we want 8 of them. And can you get it done by next week? No. And what she was flustered. She's like, well, how do I say no? It's like, well, you're not saying no because you don't want to do it. You're saying no and giving context. It's going to take us 2 hours to set up the studio. It's going to take us 4 hours to record one. We got to coordinate all of these people. You're looking at 80, 90 hours of manpower here. We want to do that, but how can we do that in a way that is going to be sustainable? So some of it is just communicating. It's not that I don't want to do it. It's I want to take the prioritize how it's going to make it, how we're going to be able to make it work for us. So that becomes a big issue, is communication. Like number one, talk through it.
Yeah. Let me add to that. I have these conversations all the time, and I'll just tell you straight up, if you're unhealthy mentally, you will burn out. I have too many conversations where I meet new comm directors and I'm like, well, are you pioneering this position or did you replace somebody? And the answer is typically, oh yeah, I'm replacing the last person. What happened to them? Yeah, they burned out. Okay, what are you going to do different that's going to not allow you to burn out? And they just go, I don't know. I go, you need a strategy. And so my recommendation, if you're listening to this and you find yourself going, yeah, I'm on this path towards burnout, is get some help, get some coaching. And, we offer that here as, at the Church Communications Group, we do a ton of coaching for the specific reasons of helping you create a better strategy, a sound strategy that actually builds in margin and helps you lead up. What I mean by that is your example, Zach, is all too common. And that is not only just from, your boss or your boss's boss, but also other ministries around you bombarding you with last minute requests. And how can you sustain that kind of activity at a high level and think that you're actually winning? You're not. So my recommendation, my advice is get some counseling, some coaching from somebody who's been in the trenches and who has figured out how to get out of it and how to actually move the needle, so to speak, and get to a spot where it's possible, get to a spot where you are operating on a healthy level that helps your church overall.
I love that, Jason. It's super practical. I'm going to drill down and get even a little bit more practical in terms of just something that I think every comms director ought to do, I think this is just ministry in general. There's a very good chance that the people that you report to don't know everything that you do. They know a lot of what you do, and they see the results of a lot of the things that you're doing. So lead pastors need to do this, associate pastors need to do this, comm directors need to do this, worship directors need to do this. I would say you need to make an inventory of everything it is that you do. Get out a Google Sheet and make a list of everything that you do on a weekly basis and a monthly basis and a quarterly basis, okay? Then I challenge you to prioritize those things into 3 different categories. These are the things that I get to do that give me energy. Then I want you to take all the things and go, these are the things that I have to do that suck the life out of me. And then the third category is these are the things that I do because they need to get done, but they have no emotional toll on me one way or another. They're just kind of neutral impact on my job satisfaction. Okay.
Yeah.
What you're looking for is you're looking to see how out of balance you are in terms of your weekly and monthly responsibilities of the things that suck the life out of you. Because if you're out of balance and you're spending more of your time doing the things that you don't enjoy, that maybe you're not as gifted in, that are harder for you to accomplish with the same level of energy, enthusiasm, and maybe creativity as the things in the other quadrants, you've got to figure out how to find the balance in that. Sometimes it might be recruiting some volunteers to do the things that you're not as gifted at or you're not as joyful in doing. But you can't live in that red line space for a long time and maintain effective ministry fruitfulness. You're going to burn out. And so I think it's in a healthy church leadership environment, healthy church staff culture, you should be able to say, hey, here's the 48 things that I'm doing on a weekly and a monthly basis. And here's the 20 that, man, these are the things that make my feet hit the floor running every day. These are the 7 or 10 things that I'm doing that if I never had to do these things again, I would be jumping for joy. And here's the other things that I'll continue doing because I'm good with it. It's okay, right? I think all of us have those things. And I would say do that inventory, sit down with your leadership team and ask for help. Hey, how can I find better balance in this? I know that in every situation, there's no job that's perfect. There's no job where you get to do only the fun things that you like to do all the time. But at the same time, from a sustainability standpoint, you can't live in that place where the majority of what you're doing, the majority of your time is being spent living in a space where you're unhappy all the time. Be honest with your leadership team on that. Any comments about that, guys, that idea? You like that idea?
I like that idea a lot. I mean, it goes towards the coaching. Sometimes you need somebody else, a partner, to help you navigate all that. It's sometimes very tough to do it on your own.
Yeah.
So again, if it's paid coaching, go get it. If you can't afford that, find a peer, another comms director that you can lean on, and you can lean on each other. And if you go to Connexa, our new app, you'll find people like that in Connexa. But I'd recommend you take that approach. That's a good one, Bart.
Yeah. Let's move on to pain point number 2. Okay, this is one where we talk about this one all the time. This is a pain point, and it is bridging the generational communication divide, bridging the generational communication gap. If you are, whether you're in a small church, mid-sized church, large church, you've got people of all generations in your church. Some of you have been some of you killed your bulletin in 2020 during the pandemic days, and you haven't brought it back, and you haven't even thought about it. Some of you are spending too many hours every single week doing a bulletin every single week, because there's a generation of people in your church that absolutely need the bulletin. We've got we've got bulletin readers, we got TikTok users, we got everything in between. So let's talk a little bit about what some of the challenges are in bridging that generational communication gap. Jason, you want to lead off on this one?
Oh, this is such a fun one. Okay, so I'll typically, when I work with churches, especially when we're kind of building a new website, because we build a lot of church websites, I start with asking really important questions like, who's your target audience? Who are you trying to reach? And then I compare that to, well, who are you right now? If I looked at across the worship center, who I probably see lots of generations and different cultural backgrounds of people, nationalities, all that kind of stuff, right? I probably maybe see all that. And so I kind of start there to go, okay, well, if you're trying to communicate, you first have to understand the audience you're trying to communicate to. And so your website specifically should be geared towards people who are not yet a part of your congregation, right? So we get into this deeper conversation about structuring the right communication to the right audience, and then understanding that particular audience, how they like to receive information and how they use information, right? And absolutely gets into well, you're not probably trying to grow older as a church. I very rarely have those conversations. Yeah, Jason, we have too many 20-year-olds and 30-year-olds in our church. We're trying to reach the 40s, 50s, and 60s. No one is saying that. And if that's your church, wow. I'd love to talk with you, because
I do know of one church that is in a retirement community, and that is their target. Their target is 55 plus, because their community is a 55 plus.
But they have those people. I don't know any church that has a whole bunch of 90% 20 and 30-year-olds, and they're trying to reach older people. Okay, so most churches in general, they're older and they're trying to grow younger, unless that like you just said, they're in a zone, in a geographical area that's no, this is like retirement community village. We're in Florida. Okay, that's a whole different thing. But I think your point is really, really good. It's how do you, as a comm director, how do you communicate to those specific audiences? You can't alienate, especially the older generation, because those are usually the people that are really committed to your church. They have a lot more disposable income. They give very regularly. That's part of their DNA. And so you want to help them continue to be a disciple of Jesus. So in my opinion, you got to really, you can't just go, yeah, we're trying to phase out the bulletin. Well, be careful about that, because if you phase out that bulletin, you better supplement it with something that they can relate to, because that audience is incredibly important. I'm thinking of Linda, Zach's mom.
She needs a bulletin for sure.
She needs a bulletin. Yeah. That's how she communicates. So, it's not like you're not trying to get rid of stuff. You're trying to say, how do I help the people in our church, understanding who they are and making sure that they get what they need without causing too much craziness for me. It's I'd be careful with that as well. Do you need to print 1,500 bulletins for the 50 people? No. So there's some common sense in all that, but I think it's a pain point for a lot of comm directors.
Yeah. And what I like what you're saying is, like you said, figuring out what that generation or that audience wants and needs. A lot of times we don't even ask them. We begin to make assumptions and assessments. It's 10 young adults in your church. Why are we not asking them, hey, what's your thoughts on the emails? Did you open it? Did you like it? Did you not like it? What about this post? What about bulletins? What about this signage? You have access to ask them their feedback. We are intentionally trying to communicate to them, so it's easy enough to ask them what they want. And with the bulletin, maybe we can figure out more creative and strategic ways, so that way it cuts down work on us, but still supplies it. Instead of a weekly bulletin, can we give you a monthly bulletin? Because most of that stuff stays on there for a month anyway. Instead of us having to work every week to do it, can we work once a month and give you what you need in that? So I always encourage, ask their feedback. Do your research. Yes, data shows us and helps us understand an audience, but if we have direct access to them, we should be able to ask them and be able to figure out, how can I bridge and reach your specific generation too?
Yeah, that's good.
We've camped a bit here on the bulletin, and I do want to, I'm going to come back to that in just a moment. But I think that, one of the things that is a reality is that even beyond the bulletin, there are different means or mechanisms by which we can be communicating to people when you start talking about email, text messages, your social media strategies, and the like. I was on a call just this morning with a church that is on a university campus. Everybody, in their church is a university student or somewhere in that age range. Few faculty members, mostly university students. And we were talking about their social media strategy and what they're using social for. And I asked the pastor, I said, have you ever asked these young people in your church what would be most helpful for them for you to be posting on Facebook and Instagram? And she said, no, I haven't ever actually done that. And she said, I think that's probably a good idea. I said, before you continue wasting, and not say that you're wasting your time, but you're spinning your wheels, creating content or posting things on the social channels, which you're not even 100% sure is, there's a return on that investment. Start asking the question. It's not a large church. It's a smaller congregation. You just ask the people what they're looking for, what will be most helpful for them. I'll come back to the bulletin. You guys are aware that outside of my work with missional marketing, I do some church revitalization coaching, and all these churches that I'm working with in the church revitalization space tend to be very small, aging congregations. I visit them from time to time. They always have a bulletin. The bulletin always has a detailed service order written in it. What prayers we're saying, what scriptures we're reading. It's very, very detailed. It's always got the birthday and the anniversary list in it. It's always got the food items needed for the food pantry or whatever it is. It's got all those details in it. And when I'm working with those churches, one of the things that I challenge them to do is not replace the bulletin, but to ask themselves, if new people were coming on Sunday mornings and you put a bulletin in their hand, what is that bulletin communicating to them? I'm actually a bulletin fan. And the reason I'm a bulletin fan is that as a pastor and a church planter, I know that sometimes new people come to my church and they're looking for something to do that's not talking to people that they don't know. There are some of those people that I want to have a good church experience, but I'm not really an extroverted person and I'm not here to meet everybody. So what can I do? Well, those are the people that will take your bulletin and they'll go sit down on the second to the back row and try to hide before the service starts, and they will read the bulletin from cover to cover. So the question is, what's in the bulletin and does it help them? So I'm thinking about the bulletin from both angles is, okay, let's continue to honor the tradition of the past of having a bulletin for the generation of people that need that tangible piece of paper in their hand on Sundays, but also what kind of content that can we supplement or add into that bulletin that makes it, that makes it helpful for the new people. I went to see a musical this weekend, and I took a picture of the playbill and I texted it to Zach because Zach likes to go to musicals, and I go to musicals from time to time. So I wanted him to know that I'm doing a Zach thing and going to see a musical. But what did I do while I was waiting for the show to start? Reading through the bios of the actors, the performers, the whole. I'm trying to learn about what's about to happen, what I'm about to see, and I think that playbill, so to speak, quote unquote, bulletin is something that can be useful both for that demographic in your congregation that needs the piece of paper, but also for new people as they're coming into church that need to learn something about your church and the experience they're going to have. So there's my 10 cents worth there.
What I'm hearing is that churches need to bring in playbills. So we need headshots and bios of the worship team, the lead pastor.
Bad idea. No,
that
is a terrible idea. You have a lot of good ideas. That one, no bios of the worship team. That might get us in trouble more often than it helps, actually.
Yes.
Yeah. Yep.
Okay, let's go to praying point number 3. You ready? We've talked about this one on this podcast often, and this is also something that we address from time to time in our roadshow, and that is the approval bottleneck. Too many people who have too much say in what gets communicated in the church. Like, who gets the final say on what announcements get made on the platform on Sunday? Who makes the final decision about what gets printed in the bulletin or what gets sent out in the newsletter or what gets posted on social media? Let's talk about sort of the design by committee frustrations or the communication by committee frustrations that comm directors often face.
Well, we first have to know a little, we first have to know who we are. And we're not the decision makers often on some things, and some things we are. If you're not sure, you need to find out. How do you do that? Ask your boss. And I would start to define, you just said something that I always give this advice. Whatever happens on stage is not my decision.
Hmm.
That's the worship team with the lead pastor. What announcements are going to get communicated, that's for them to decide. What I want to do is influence that, right? Because I'm not there. I mean, you all have your order of worship, and it probably stays the same every single time. And so, like at my church, they do a video announcement. Now, I'm guessing in that video announcement, the comms director has some authority on, we're going to communicate this, this, and this, but that's typically decided by the leadership team. Okay. So it depends on the medium. What goes into social media, that's pretty much my job. I'm going to determine what I'm going to promote and how I'm going to promote it in social media or on our website, in our e-newsletter, the weekly email newsletter, that kind of a thing. But I think you first have to ask your boss, who makes these decisions. So if you haven't had that conversation, you need to go get that figured out. Certainly, if you're the comm director, I'm guessing you're not telling the lead pastor, okay, pastor, I need you to make these 2 announcements. Here's what you're going to say, bullet points. Go ahead and do that. If that's you, awesome. I mean, that's pretty cool. It's usually not that way. And so I think it's first understanding who's making these approvals and what space do you live in. And that probably comes with some experience. If you're a comm director that's been in this position for 15 years and you're on the leadership team, you probably have more clout and more decision making than if you're brand new, you're a couple years on the job type of thing and you're learning the ropes a little bit. But I think all of it, if it's hazy, you're not quite sure, you got to go get some clarity, and you got to have that conversation, figure out on these different platforms, either website, social media, on stage, email newsletter, who has the decision-making authority? And of course, what does that look like? Can my lead pastor always come down and trumpet and say, I want this to, of course, probably, but have that conversation. I don't know, Zach, what do you think?
Yeah, and the question I would always ask there is this information documented? Because in the church world, we don't really document flow charts. We don't document structure and order there.
Yeah.
So I was on a calls with a comms director, and the kids ministry pastor didn't like something that was going on social media. I don't care. Like, you're the kids pastor. Like, what do
You'll get over
you have to do with any of this? But they have created a culture where there were no boundaries in regards to what you get to speak into. We need to make sure as lead pastors and XPs that we do have a flow chart of exactly what you're saying. This is who's responsible for on stage. This is who gets to speak into that. That's the hardest part for us as comms directors, because sometimes we do inherit a culture where people get to make all the decisions that have no space into that. And this is where we get to lead up, is making sure that we're connecting and helping people see their part in the mission. I want them to tie their identity into the mission of the church, not necessarily the decisions that they make or even what they produce, because the kids pastor, she or he might feel that, like, oh, I'm always making this decision, but your mission in this church and your purpose here is to minister to children and to create a safe environment for them and their families. That is not correlated to what's being posted on social media. So in order for us to all be cohesive and working towards the goal, I need you to stay inside that lane. And sometimes this stuff is not documented, and we need to have honest conversations as leadership of how do we create those boundaries and how do we attach people to their mission rather than the things that they're doing and the decisions that they make.
Yeah, and I think I'm going to get a little plug here. There's a new tool that my friend Cameron created called communicate.app. So go to communicate.app. He created a calendar system where you can, the staff can see it, but not everybody can edit it. But you can see what's going to get communicated and what platform and what day. And you want to check that out, because I think half of it is just letting the staff know, hey, here's what's happening in social this week, and here's what's going in the newsletter, here's what's going to be announced on the stage this weekend, that type of a thing. And so making sure everybody can see that is pretty darn important. But who can edit that and actually get approval for that, you need to have those conversations.
One of the things I would emphasize at this point is that as the comms director, you may not have authority over the decisions in all of those places. But one thing that you have to, I would fight for, is the authority to guard the brand and guard
yes.
the messaging. So somebody on the staff has to be the keeper of the church culture, and the culture is disseminated through what you say, the way you say it, visual identity, the words that you use. And so I would say, as the comms director, you really want to have ownership of that. You may not have ownership over everything that gets said or everything that gets published or everything that gets emailed or distributed, but you want to have the final say in the way that it gets communicated. At the end of the day, we as church ministers, whether we're in comms or we're preaching or we're leading worship or doing kids or family ministry, whatever it is, we have a limited amount of people's time and attention because there's so many other things vying for their time and their attention. The attention span is super, super short. So we need to become experts in saying what we need to say and making sure that people hear what we want them to hear with a little bit of time and attention that we get from them. And so as the comms director, you've got to be an expert in that. How do we say what we need to say in the timing and on the platforms with the right words that communicate our culture, the expectations, uphold our values, and get people to respond the way that we want them to respond. So at the end of the day, the buck does stop with you, the comms director. And if the buck is going to stop with you to make sure that people know what they're supposed to know when they're supposed to know it, then you've got to have some level of ownership there. And then those are the things that I would probably fight for in those situations. You can't fight for everything. You can't win everything, but guarding the messaging is what I would be fighting for. I'm watching the clock here. We're going to get through all four of these top four pain points. Okay. The fourth one, this one is one, again, this is probably not as verbalized a pain point as some of the others are, but I think it's a felt pain point. And that is measuring my impact in my ministry.
Yeah.
How do I, as a communications director, know that what I'm doing is actually making a difference in people's spiritual lives? The success metrics for communications are kind of fuzzy. Other than likes on Facebook, how do I know if what I'm doing is actually mattering? Jason, you on one of our recent podcast episodes, you were sharing about the fact that you took blame from ministries when you were a comms director, when they didn't have enough people show up to do their thing. Well, that was the communication director's fault. No, it wasn't the communication director's fault, but you're being measured by those metrics. Jason, why don't you speak a little bit to that, just that measuring ministry impact from a comms perspective?
Well, I said earlier, this is a ministry. You're not just somebody in a cubicle that's told to do this or do that. I think you need to, if that's where you actually sit, work to get out of that, because you have an important, really, really important ministry. And so I tend to break it down into layers. So maybe at the very first layer is things that you can control. So what are you measuring? Let's talk about your analytics on your website. Is your website visitors, up over last year? Is the conversions up over last year? Let's look at your email open rates. Are they consistently going up? Is it going down? What's going on there? Social media, let's look at the metrics. So you have tools that you can look at the metrics to see if you're winning or not, just from the standpoint of a number. Okay, so I first want to wrap my arms around that layer of going, what is it that I control that I can look at? So if my lead pastor comes and says, how are we doing on our emails last couple of years? You have that ready. You don't want to just sit there and go, I don't know. That's a good question. You're not doing your job. So make sure you understand what that is. The second layer would be from a ministry's point of view, right? So kids ministry, young adults, what metrics are you guys measuring, and how can I play a role in that as a comms director? I want to help you win, right? So I want to be in tune with that layer of numbers, and it may be pushing them. Maybe they have no clue, Well, how can I help you track your numbers? Not that we're just always dialed by a number, but I'll tell you what, you want to be moving the needle on getting more numbers because every number represents a person, that represents a story that God it loves and has changed, wants to change. So even though we get sometimes wrapped up in, we want to have more numbers. Well, it's the people, that's the number. So that's the third. The top one would be, as a church, I was just on a call because we build websites. So I was talking to this leadership team about their website, and I was asking some basic questions. How many baptisms did you have last year compared to the year before? They didn't know. How many people said yes to Jesus this last year from the year before? They didn't know. How many people are in groups? Because you told me groups is an important component of your church. How many people are in groups this year compared to last year? And we didn't, I don't really push hard, but I kind of planted the seeds to go, it would be good to know that, because that is the stuff that we can help move the needle on, because it's important to make sure that, we're winning more people to Jesus. This is what we're called to do. Love God, love people, make disciples. And so if you don't really know your numbers, how do you know how do you know if you're winning? And as a comm director, your job is to support the goals and the direction of the leadership, of your lead pastor. You're not setting those goals. Maybe you're part of the conversation, but they're the ones that should be setting those goals. And so I always look at that, because I'm going, okay, we want to have more. We want to have a baptism weekend. What kind of story can I go get that's going to communicate that baptism helps with life change? So instead of just saying, hey, we're having a baptism weekend, we're actually telling a story. That's the comm director's job. I can play a role in getting more people to say yes to Jesus and get baptized because of stories. Ooh, that's me. I'll go find some stories, or I'll ask the ministries about people they know, and I'll run with that. Right? That's a way that you can play into helping your team, your staff, your church win. And that there is the ROI. At least there's a lot more to that. But Zach, what do you think about that?
And what you brought up is yes, we want, pastor comes to you, we want baptisms. And so, yes, we're using stories. We're able to get that. But something that we have to train ourselves and our leadership to recognize is that numerical impact on different platforms does not equal the same output. So if I'm only pushing baptism stories on social media, I know 95% of the people that see my content do not go to my church. So if I'm saying baptism was not successful because of our social media numbers, that is an unrealistic expectation that we just set. And then everybody feels defeated. But if I want baptisms to be successful, I need to storytell where? In my emails, because email are people that are bought into what we're doing. They're wanting to take the next step in their faith. They're wanting to go deeper in their relationship with God and in their church. So that's where I'm storytelling. So part of the issue is making sure that we're setting realistic expectations based on the numbers. A high engagement rate on social media does not always correlate to numerical growth in-house. So making sure that we're setting expectation.
Love that. Yeah.
I'm a next steps guy. So in not just for comms people, but for everybody in church and ministry. And I think, I think it was actually Brady Shearer that was riffing on this, 10 years ago. And he was talking about, the metrics that churches tend to measure are, we measure butts in seats and bucks in the bucket, right? How was the offering and what was the weekend attendance? Both of which are lag measures, not lead measures. Now, if I'm going to use this term, lead and lag measure, this is something we use internally here at Missional Marketing. If you're not familiar with that, you should get on ChatGPT and ask ChatGPT or Claude or Perplexity, whatever your favorite AI tool is, to explain to you what lead measures and lag measures are. The short version is lead measures are things that you can control. Lag measures are things that you can't. You can't control how many people show up on a Sunday morning. What you can control, so therefore that's a lag measure. What you can control from a lead measure is how many people you invite to church on Sunday morning and how frequently you're inviting them and by what methods you're inviting them. And so, I had a call with a church recently that set a pretty hefty goal for themselves for their Christmas Eve service attendance. And they missed their mark. Now, their numbers were up year over year from 2024 Christmas Eve to 2025, but they didn't hit the number that they had set. And their first instinct was, well, the communications director didn't do a good marketing campaign. Like that was almost the knee-jerk reaction. And so she asked me, she's like, can you pull some data? I need to show that the ad campaigns that we ran actually worked. I'm like, the ad campaigns that we ran work really, really well. Now, your budget was exactly the same for 2025 as it had been for 2024. So to expect a different set of results based on the same input, I think is a little presumptuous. Like, I don't know why you'd expect we'll have more people when we do the exact same thing. That doesn't make any sense, but hey, that's a different conversation for a different day. But when I think about events and activities, if I'm the comms director, I'm going to say, if we're going to announce this, or we're going to promote this, or we're trying to engage people in this process, what's the one thing that we want everybody to do as their next step? Because if I know what that measurable is, and I'm now effectively communicating to everyone what their next step is, I can now actually see the ROI on my work based on how many people respond and take that next step. They join a group, or they attend the ministry fair, or whatever it is that we have this going on that we're supposed to be measuring. It's not just the output or the number of people that show up. It's the number of people that show up and then actually take a next step. And I think that if we can figure out how to be more next step centric, it actually helps us know whether or not we're winning. People are moving along a pathway of discipleship, or whatever it is that you have in your church.
Well, and I also look at, I kind of visually related to a scale. So if you got a scale and you're like, okay, we want to have more baptisms, well, you're going to have to put some more stuff on that scale to move that.
Yeah.
Who has the most weight? Does social media have the most weight? Do paid ads have the most weight? Does your newsletter have the most weight? Or does your lead pastor have the most weight? Okay, so we would probably safe to say that your lead pastor, by getting up and hammering home baptisms, or maybe it's groups or whatever it is, that's going to carry the most weight. Now, will the lead pastor carry the most weight in getting attendance for Christmas? Maybe, maybe not. Probably, he's going to have he's a 100-pound gorilla weight, right? So he needs to talk about that. But you might want to use some paid ads, because he can't go out and reach 10,000 people, but you can through a paid ad campaign. So I think you also have to understand the weight of the weights, if you will, when you pull that trigger to say, okay, pastor, for the next 3 weeks, I need you to hammer this home, because that's an internal thing we're trying to move versus trying to reach more people outside.
Yeah. Any party thoughts there, Zach?
No, I like the next steps. Yeah.
I like the next steps.
Set expectations. All of this is as communication directors, your job, communicate. Yeah. Maybe that's our deficiency, is our pain points are in us not communicating.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's call this one done. I'm going to wrap this up. Thank you guys for hanging out with me today, and I hope our audience has found this to be helpful. One of the things that we do at Missional Marketing and Church Communications Group is we provide a lot of free resources through this podcast, through blog posts, on our articles on our website. There's a Facebook group you can join called the Church Communications Group, where there's all kinds of helpful stuff there. Jason mentioned our app, Connexa. We'll link to the Connexa app. We haven't really been promoting that a whole lot publicly, but there is a growing audience on the Connexa app, which is specifically designed for church communications peoples, growing community there, and more resources that we're going to be loading there so that you can be better equipped to do your role. We produce this podcast because we want to help churches grow by leveraging digital marketing and effective communications. And we just want to be an advocate for you, those of you who are in the trenches doing the work, ministry work, week in, week out. So we appreciate you hanging out with us and making it all the way to the end of this episode. If you haven't yet subscribed wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts, make sure that you do that so that you don't miss any future episodes. And if you're watching on our YouTube channel, make sure that you give us a like, leave a comment. Love to engage with you there. Let us know if there's anything more that we can do for you. On behalf of Jason and Zach, I'm Bart, and thanks again for tuning in to the Missional Marketing Podcast.